Committee of the whole meeting for the town board for June 8th. Please stand for the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call.
John Baisley, First Ward.
Joe Conti, Third Ward.
Michael Safone, Fourth Ward.
Joseph Lepore, Fifth Ward.
Ann Shershen, Sixth Ward.
Todd Tancredi, Supervisor.
Felicia Salvatore, Town Clerk.
Jim Nelson, Attorney for the town.
All right, we've got 4 items for discussion on our agenda tonight, so we will get right into it. Item number 1 is Highway Business District Map Amendment, and this is for the Crown Heights area on Route 9. Our Director of Development, Mr. Wilson, is here tonight, so I'm going to let Neil take it away.
All right, thank you very much. Half of the materials were provided to you when I had them done last week, and I actually in front of everybody's place is some additional supplementary material concerning some of the other items that we'll talk about tonight. But one of the first one, the Highway Business District amendments. What I've done is that I've attached a series of parcel access maps, as well as this would actually be the text of a local law for the map amendment. So let me just kind of take you through it. The very first one, and I apologize, it's the quality of the maps, but the very first one involves it's on the town's historic registry. It's the Fort Family Homestead. It's somewhat south of the intersection of Southgate Drive, and it actually abuts the Casperkill Country Club on the east side of Route 9. That entire property is a little over 2 acres. It is part of the overall golf course holdings that Ginsburg has. It is currently zoned 2-acre residential. A couple of years ago, Bob Dooley, who's a local restaurant operator, and actually he runs the food service and the restaurant in the golf club at Casperkill. Yeah, sorry. He had approached me about taking over the historic structure and converting it into a restaurant, which personally I think is a really good idea. The structure right now is kind of probably to the point where it's, next couple of years, we're going to start seeing some significant deterioration.
Actually, we took a tour of it a couple of years ago, and the roof is still solid. It's a slate roof, fingers crossed, and it was actually dry on the inside, and we actually scared a squatter and had to ask him to be removed. So it's not in as bad a shape as you think, and also the good chunk of it is stone, so that's solid. But I think you're right that things are going to slowly start.
Yeah, no, I didn't mean to suggest that it's
no, it's
in
not
that
to the point
of
of caving in. No.
Right, but it is surrounded by large trees, and I also have just kind of maybe sidebar. We had a number of large tree limbs come down on Bill Herman's property. I don't know if anybody has been by the old Herman's nursery on 44. And Bill and his wife, unfortunately, haven't been in the house probably close to a year. And the first tree limb and then the second tree limb, you've got, the roof is open to the elements. And eventually I made a call to the attorney representing the current owner and said, you got to do something about this. So that's what you've seen out there, is that they were issued demolition permits. And unfortunately, given the age and condition of the house itself, which was actually a very nice structure at one point in time, it was simply not salvageable. But that's the kind of thing. Once water gets into these things, the real deterioration starts. But, kind of getting back to Bob's question, personally, I think it's a great idea. Yeah. It's really the bones of the structure are still in great shape. It's a good-looking structure, and it's the kind of a use that properly done will ensure that, it'll remain, a viable structure.
Absolutely. And also one advantage of this, too, is it's of the same era as Coppola's. But Coppola's has been so cannibalized over the last 250 years that there's very little of the original building, which is truly historic, but there's very little of it left. Right. This one is basically intact. It only had one addition put off of it.
Right.
So, yeah, it's actually, and it's significant to the history of the area, and we agree, we'd love to see a restaurant go in there. Plus, it's a nice tie-in to the golf course, that he can use it for events, and when they have overflow events, it can be at the historical house, or it can be at the restaurant on the golf course, so.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
it's a good fit.
Now, the only problem, of course, is that we don't allow restaurants in the 2-acre residential district. So it
For
would
good
make,
reason.
it's just a minor little detail.
Oh, yeah, and there are people lined up who want to live on Route 9 next
Right,
to the
yeah.
Friendly Ford, so yeah.
Exactly. Right
that-
across the street, we have it's the old Tuscany Square project that actually failed because they ended up hitting extensive rock and decided not to pursue blasting. The town does have a sewer pump station out in front, but that entire site, along with the properties to the south of that, which includes the Bonefish and the storage units and the recently approved Hyatt, is all zoned for highway business. So I think it would be a fairly simple matter of sort of dragging the highway business zone across to encompass this piece. So that would be my recommendation, and it would allow then Bob to bring forward his plans.
Yeah, let's go through each one of these, Neil, if you would. We got that one, so let's move to the,
So then the second one, now we're moving kind of back onto the west side of 9. This is 3 Neptune Road. So this would be the parcel as you come in, Neptune Road. You've got the Red Lobster, and then it's Herb Reddle owns the building, but it's where the EDC is located, so that would be one. Right now, it's zoned for office research, and the office research district is an old carryover, probably from the time when IBM controlled, most of this property back in the 80s and 90s, and it allows for a very limited range of uses back there, and
so that whole building's in the EDs, or office research?
that property is, yeah. But interestingly enough, across the street where you've got the new Dunkin' Donuts, the property where the Bounce It is, and then the Hardee's, that's highway business. It's this
Now,
weird split zone.
This piece that you're talking about now, is there any vacant land?
No, it's really pretty
It's
much
all
the building and
developed.
then just
So I don't
the
have-
park. They've got a lot of parking in the back.
Yeah, yes, they do.
Yeah.
Is that
Okay.
the same piece, Neil? The big parking lot in the back, that's still?
That's all
still the
there,
same piece?
right, it's all one.
That seems to make sense as well.
Yeah, so then as you move back, there's this really tiny little piece right next to it, and there's an auto repair shop right there. It's Sutz is the last name.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Okay, and then the property immediately behind it, and then you come to the end of Neptune Road, you've got the Iron Mountain, and then interestingly, to the east of the Iron Mountain is that building where again, it was part of the industry, or it's the business park that Dave Kaminsky redeveloped, is the building where we've got the climbing wall folks are in. So that is also office research. And so when I was digging into this, I also found out, for some unknown reason, that the office research zone actually extends across the backside of the Dodge dealership. So if you can kind of look at the next, I think if you flip a couple of pages in, you'll see, I think it's the very last page. So you've got the Dodge dealership, and then he's got all that inventory parking in the back, and the line actually cuts across that inventory lot behind the dealership buildings. I have no idea. I went back and took a look at the original zoning map from '93 that we used to do the 2007 update, and it shows exactly that, which is interesting because they've been there for decades. But the front half of their property is zoned for highway business. It's just that a piece of their inventory lot in the back is office research, which frankly doesn't make a lot of sense.
So all these parcels that you have on this for discussion tonight have all, for the most part, fully developed. They either have a business on them or a parking lot.
Right.
I mean, the family Fort House is the only one that's probably not being used currently like it will be maybe after the zoning change, but other than that, they're all developed. And it's
Yep.
just that they are functioning more as highway business before we have this old zoning classification as office research.
Right,
All
right. And as I said, the front half, Several of the properties on the right-hand side, the north side of Neptune Road, including the Dodge dealership, are already zoned for highway business.
Yeah.
So to me, it's kind of a cleanup, and it seems to make sense. And you're absolutely right. The kind of the odd one out is the Ford family, and frankly, that would be one. I think Ann is correct. Nobody's going to live in the thing. The thing has been vacant for a long time, and it would be an opportunity for somebody to come in and return that property to something
I
useful.
think, right, I agree, and I think this is the only chance we have of possibly, to rezone it so it could be used, as a restaurant or something like that, so I think I would say it makes sense.
Neil, have you talked to all these owners? of all
I
these properties?
I've talked to Rettel, and I've talked to Ginsburg. Actually, I talked to Kevin Marinan. Who's,
He owns the Fort House?
Yeah, about the Ford House. I have not talked to McKay about the Dodge dealership, but I'm not going to have a problem with it. I will reach
He
out to
probably
him
doesn't even
before.
realize it's zoned off his research.
None of us did.
Now, the Fort House, how much acreage are we talking about? We're talking about,
About 2.2 acres.
right, so it's not big enough so that, say Ginsburg in this case is gonna get a windfall from us changing this.
No. Well, and the fact that it's already listed
2
on
acres,
our
you-
local historic
It says
registry,
ours.
somebody wanted
Preserves
to come
that
and tear
home.
it down, we're going to put up a fuss.
Right.
Right.
Okay,
I
good.
just want to make sure you all know. I mean, I want somebody to come in, and which I had the one years ago on Sheaf Road, right after we rezoned, he came in 5 years later, thinking he had a business highway and was turned in office research. I want to make sure all these guys know.
Right.
Before we put anything on the agenda that they're gonna,
Yeah.
that they are
yeah.
changing it.
Yeah, I've already talked to Rettel. I've got to reach out to Sutz, who owns the little repair shop back there, and the Dodge dealership owner, but the rest of them are all aware of it.
All right, good.
With this change of district, does the tax roll changes too, or it stays the same?
No, the tax roll is, whatever, it's assessed, whatever it's assessed, but they're all, as Todd pointed out, they're all developed, whatever, they are what they are.
So there's no increase of property tax in case you change the zone or something?
No. So if you're okay with this, then what I would propose to do is to give this to you for your meeting next week so we could start the secret process and set
As long as
the
they're all
public hearing.
contacted, I don't want any surprises later on.
Sounds good.
Would it be a benefit for that too, for a change of that use, right? Right?
Office research has become a pretty
Yeah.
dead zone in a lot of areas.
Yeah, the range of uses that's allowed is really narrow, and it's focused on office, and nobody's doing office. We've actually got, we've overbuilt office at this point.
Yeah, I just don't want it tomorrow developer to come in and do, because of the zone's changed, they can do anything they want, so we just have
Well,
to.
that's why I was interested in
Yep.
if the parcels are developed, there's either a building or a parking lot on them that are being actively used. That's kind of why I was asking that, so.
Right.
Right.
Right, I agree.
Yeah, otherwise, our practice has been, if you've got, an otherwise undeveloped parcel, somebody wants to do something, make a proposal.
Exactly.
And, we'll vet it through that. Yeah.
How new is some of the buildings back there in Neptune Road, like the mechanic?
Oh, he's been there for a long time.
Been there a long time. Yeah.
Take a look at it.
older than me.
Long time.
The buildings that Dave Kaminsky rehabbed, those were IBM buildings in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah, they look good. I mean,
Yeah.
that area, it's really,
Yeah, he's done a really
Performing
nice
nice,
job on it.
yeah.
I don't know how old the Iron Mountain is in the back. Probably 20, 30, maybe, I don't know.
I would
Been there a
think at
while.
least.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, so that takes care of number one.
Yep.
Thank you, Neil.
Committee of the whole discussion number two, special use permit amendments, planning board to assume review and approval of certain special uses.
Okay, so for this, it's, I would refer you to the little package. There's three of them. They were held together by a paper clip that I handed out tonight. And what I did was that I printed the entirety of the R 20,000, the ATC, and the Neighborhood Highway Business District. And this is just by way of example. And I didn't create legislation when I wanted to have a discussion about what I perceive to be sort of an inefficiency in the way our zoning is presently set up. So if everybody has those, so I just take a look. Let's start with the, actually, let's start with the Arlington Town Center District regulations.
Okay?
Now, historically, the town has authorized the planning board to do site plans and the zoning board of appeals to do special permits. And the special permits range from everything from home occupation uses to accessory apartments, all the way up to motor vehicle and some of the other larger uses. One of the things that occurs during the review, let's say, I'm going to just flip to the second page of the ATC district. So take a look at paragraph C, special permitted uses, item number 8. And again, this is just by way of example. So we say that in the Arlington Town Center, hotels and motels are subject to special use permit. And we have a little list of criteria elsewhere in the code. One of the things that happens is that the planning board typically does the seeker review and works up the site plan. Somewhere in the process, the application for the special permit is submitted separately to the zoning board. And typically what has been happening is while the planning board is working on the site plan, the application before the zoning board probably sits in hiatus until the site plan has been done. And the reason for that is that many of the criteria in special permit touch on and sort of go to the elements of the site plan. The problem that I see is that the applicant, and this is the inefficiency, the applicant is bouncing back and forth between meetings before the planning board and meetings before the zoning board because the special permit is its own permit for a separate board. There is no statutory requirement that the zoning board be the sole grantor of special permits. In fact, when I was updating the code back in 2006, I had an idea to authorize the planning board, particularly for the items where you have a site plan approval, like a hotel, could be a car dealership or whatever. Some of those uses that have a special permit approval, have the planning board do all of that. And the decision at the staff level at that time was no, leave it alone. This is the way we've always kind of done it. But again, I'd say the inefficiency is sort of this bouncing back and forth. But the other thing that also happens is, taking the case of Friendly Honda, which just expanded their site. You guys, the town board had granted the rezoning to allow for the expansion of the inventory lot. At which point they came back to the planning board for their site plan approval. And then they still had to go to the zoning board for a special permit approval. In each of those cases, the applications were separately referred to county planning, and we had to wait for, so it's the same project, but all separate referrals because the underlying permits are being granted, by different boards. Now, town board, obviously, you can change the zoning map, so that's kind of a done deal. Where I see we could have picked up some time and assisted the applicant in easing through the process is to have the planning board in that instance grant both the site plan as well as the special permit approval and just track it, track the approval process through the planning board. Instead, because the planning board and the zoning board meet in different nights, we were sort of skipping some months somewhere along the way just because of the way the meeting dates and the deadlines for those two boards fell. So my suggestion would be, and again, this is all by way of example. So in the ATC district, we have hotels, we have multifamily dwellings, we've got motor vehicle accessory sales, and in some of the other ones, we've got, flipping over to the neighborhood highway business. You've got a range of uses. We talked about motor vehicle repair, sales. You've got retail businesses, restaurants with drive-throughs that get kicked into that special permit category. But in each of those instances, you've got an underlying planning board approval that's about the site plan. And yet you still have this special permit that's got to be done
Now,
by the planning board.
is that always the case?
Historically in this town, yes. Yeah, that's the way we've done it.
So you wouldn't, somebody who owned a piece of property wouldn't be able to come in for a special use permit and not have a site plan
Right.
before the planning board.
Right. My recommendation would be to change the authorizing board for those items that have a requirement of an underlying site plan approval and a special permit, give that to the planning board. Where we have other items, let's say, kind of going back to our Arlington Town Center, if you look under that second page, paragraph C, you've got accessory apartment within a single-family dwelling. That doesn't require a site plan approval.
Right, so
That should
that-
remain with the zoning board.
Yes,
And-
I
and-
understand.
Yeah, and
That's
I think
what I
the
was-
zoning board does a really good job, particularly on these uses where there isn't some other
And also
agency.
some of the home occupations.
And the
that-
home occupations.
If they don't need a site plan,
Right.
it stays with the zoning board, because we've just made some changes to the zoning law that
Right.
help with these home occupations too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we spend a lot of time on that just to try to help people out. And there is a point where they get kicked into that special permit category, but they may not need a site plan. And leave that with the plan,
So
with the
if there's
zoning
a
board.
site plan associated with it,
Right,
seems to make sense.
right, yeah. And again, there's no legal requirement to leave it with the zoning board. It's just sort of all past practice. But I think that we could do a better job of assisting applicants through the process by combining
Well,
those
I hate the
approvals.
thought of applicants bouncing back and forth.
Yeah,
That, you know, that's kind of not what the impression we want.
Well,
to
and
leave
honestly, one
anyone.
of the reasons that this sort of came bubbling to the surface too is that we recently, because again, Friendly Honda by way of example, there was a special permit, well, they had some variances as well, but there was special permit approval that was referred to county planning. They came back with a recommendation of denial. They kind of earmarked the wrong property, but they had previously had no comments at all when it was before you for the rezoning. And yet, for some reason, for the special permit approval, they came back with a recommendation of denial, and they wanted to see some changes to the site plan. And it cost the applicant a meeting, it caused a bunch of agita on, my part, what do we do? And we had a series of meetings with county planning. And, coming away from it, I said, look, we got to change this because this is going to continue to occasion. It was an anomaly, but it's going to happen. And in this case, of course, it was a project that the town was behind. We wanted to see them, move forward with it. But I think that we can avoid those scenarios by combining the approvals in certain instances with the planning board.
And our zoning board chairman's
Yes, Jim
here
is here.
tonight. Jim,
Yep.
you have any thoughts or comments?
And Jim is probably hearing this for the first time. I haven't talked to Jim about this.
This is the first time, although, and on first impression, I'm generally in favor of this. We've had some cases in the past where, for purposes of granting special use permit, we've wanted to attach conditions that are in effect site plan changes, and we don't have engineers on staff. We don't have the planning department on staff, and so I think we're a little bit uncomfortable about requiring site plan changes, and they're usually of the nature of making sure there's sufficient screening so that the new use isn't detrimental to neighbors and that kind of thing. First of all, we don't know what kind of screening, for example, might be most effective. Should it be planting? Should it be fences? Whatever. And we don't know how that impacts other elements of the site plan. We're sometimes given site plans, and we can kind of tell, but not always. So this idea of having a kind of a one-stop site plan and special use permit does make a lot of sense. It's routinely done in many other towns. In fact, there are some towns where site or special use permits are only done by the planning board, not the zoning board at all. Here's my one reservation. And I don't know quite how it works with the planning board, but with the zoning board, there's very clear requirements of notification of neighbors and the public hearing, and we often get a number of people at that. And I would just ask you to make sure that if you combine these two, we don't lose
Yeah.
the public notification.
Yeah, no, that's a great point.
And the way that planning board happens, sometimes the public hearing is way up front, before the neighbors really know what it is that's being proposed. And we get a lot of that at our meetings, where people come and say, nobody told us that XYZ was going in until now. And so think through how this is going to be staged, how hearings are going to be held. Maybe the planning board should have two separate hearings, one on the site plan, one on the special use. I don't
Or
know.
maybe.
Think about it.
Maybe on special use permits, we put the same requirement for notification that we have in the zoning.
I wasn't contemplating changing any of that. Yeah, it's working, yeah.
But I
Yeah.
mean, for notification, do we notify the neighbors?
We do.
Okay.
Yeah,
Now,
absolutely.
Neil, would this put this closer to the front? Now that you guys would have both of it? Instead of it always going at the end over the zoning, would this come more up in the front where people would actually get a better view on how it was going on instead of waiting until you're going through the whole process and then say, go to zoning? Would they get it more in the front loading? So we didn't, you're going through all this whole process and now you gotta go for a special use permit. We're holding it up. Shouldn't it be in the beginning so everybody would have an input, before it gets dragged all the way through this?
Honestly, what ends up happening typically is sometimes there's a delay in submitting to the special permit to the zoning board, and maybe that's a strategy on the part of the applicant. Typically, I tell them, give me everything. If you need a special permit, at the time that you issue or come in for site plan, give me the application for the zoning board as well for the special permit. What ends up happening sometimes is because the planning board might be very involved in the site plan, and as Jim pointed out, many of the elements of the special permit approval kind of go to the site plan. The applicant will submit it because we told him to, and then say, okay, open the public hearing, and by the way, we're not going to be there. We're going to wait another, couple of months until we're done with the planning board, then we'll come in and talk to the zoning board. So there's this carryover around the zoning board agenda of like an open public hearing, but nothing's been said, so and then you get a delay, and that can kind of create its own problem. But we would do that on the front end if you have a single board issuing those approvals.
And we wouldn't lose any notification to neighbors
No,
or
we
anything
would
like that?
keep all the same
Make sure that's
notification
all out
process,
there?
right.
We don't lose that, because you hear it
Yeah,
all the
I
time.
wouldn't tinker with any of that, yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks, Jim.
Do we put signs out for that too, Neil? When they change something like that, do we still put the road signs out?
We have a requirement for posting of signage for when an applicant comes in for a rezoning. We don't have there are some towns that do this, where they, require a posting of a sign that says this site is subject to a site plan
We
approval.
used to have it, the Chief Road one was a prime example years ago, they had it there. I've seen them, floating around, the sign's probably still floating around up here somewhere, it was an old metal sign.
Oh, we have them,
Yeah,
yeah, for rezoning, yeah.
Yeah.
We don't do that for special permit and site plan. We could, so there's a whole separate process that we would have to figure out and adopt, which would require them to come in and pay for, a sign. And typically, they're going to be kind of like the styrofoam signs, with something bright, large enough somebody can read it when they're driving by. We just haven't done it yet.
I just want to make sure neighbors are kept right in the loop.
Yeah. I mean, we do send out the notices for site plan, we don't, where there's a special permit involved, the public hearing is mandatory. The same is not true for things that only require site plan approval. So for like the really small projects that only need site plan, sometimes the planning board will waive site plan and just, kind of deal with it. On occasion, we get criticized for that as well. But we do follow all the notification processes, and we would going forward as we do today for special permits.
All right. So
Okay.
thank you, Neil. That sounds like it is a good idea, would make us function a little more efficiently.
Okay.
All right, moving on to Item number 3, this is a discussion concerning front yard parking amendments.
Yep. Again, this is something that occurs fairly frequently in front of the zoning board. Right now, we do not allow hedges, fences, or walls that exceed 3.5 feet in height within the front yard.
Are we talking about number 3 or 4?
Number 4 now.
Or 3 and 4?
Oh, I'm sorry, I jumped ahead. Let's go back. Parking, off-street parking. Again, this is something that I gave you tonight. I printed its chapter, it's chapter 21092, off-street parking and loading. I'm sorry, I jumped ahead.
It's okay.
And the provision that we're talking about is flip to the third page, and I highlighted it. And this was a provision that was added when we did the code update in 2006. And it was specifically in response to many of the problems we had about with the student housing up in Fairview. And it's designed to prevent, say, a landlord from, renting the place out. Next thing you know, you got a half a dozen cars parked on the front yard. Of course, they're trampling down the grass. It becomes a mud lot and that sort of thing. To that extent, it's working. Where there are variances needed to allow for the parking in the front yard. The zoning board has taken them up, and they've denied some, and they've approved a lot. We also run into this, and it isn't just about the student housing up in Fairview, where we also have variance applications that come in involving properties in Southgate. So it's not only the student housing. One of the problems is the way that we limit the width of the driveway, and we're seeing more and more, particularly with some of the newer construction, as limited as it is. Nobody wants a driveway, only a single car width, 15 feet in width. And yet that's what our code says. I've talked with Sarah extensively about this. We need to provide a little more room for people to have, double wide driveways, particularly if they've got driveways that come up, they've got 2 overhead doors. And frankly, on some of the really large houses, they might even have 3 overhead doors. There's no reason not to allow them to have driveways of a width to accommodate a large garage
Well,
like that.
in both of those instances, the driveway wouldn't exceed the boundary of the house.
Yeah.
And I
they-
understand that,
yeah.
we could word it, but I don't think that's what the attempt is here to.
Right.
If you have a home in Southgate or Fairview that has a single driveway, most of them have a single garage. If they have a double garage, then they'll have a double driveway.
Right.
I don't think there's any problem with that, but I think the intention here is to allow a single garage, a double driveway.
Right, with a single,
Correct.
yeah. But we also, like I say, we also have driveways.
I've never seen a house with a double garage that's only got a single driveway.
Yeah, what ends up happening is they come in and then they widen out. In other words, they get past that and.
Well, you don't have a curb cut that wide, that's.
Right,
you
right.
know.
So, and this is a discussion. I mean, like we
Right.
run into this.
So
I
what
could
would-
see
What's the proposal?
making an allowance, and I would have to give you the specific language. Sarah just returned from vacation. I was kicking around with her today. But I think that the language needs to take into account where you've got somebody that's got more likely a double garage, allowing them to have a double width driveway
At the road that
At the
you're
road.
talking about.
That makes sense.
going back. But that's not what this allows. So in other words, right now, it's a single, and it has to widen out when you
Right.
get the 30 feet back from the front yard. So I think we need to ease this up a little bit more.
But Neil, how many times did it come to zoning? Is this a big issue, or I get real nervous about this with the small houses and people want nothing but front yards with, all the paving and,
I think we probably, Jim, had maybe, a half a dozen in the last 4 or 5 years? Yeah. Something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It comes up in a couple of different contexts. And, one is, because of the rentals, there are just more cars that can fit in the existing driveway. That's one of them. And then the other that we've run across is houses that are being remodeled. and often the old single garage is converted into something else. It's incorporated into the house. It's turned into a room.
Right.
Well, there's a driveway that goes up to now what's going to be a blank wall or the exterior wall, and in some cases there's another garage now that's built somewhere else, or attached to the side of the house, or maybe not, and they simply want another paved area
They might want to store
for
a camper,
parking.
a truck, a trailer on their property. I get it.
Yeah, but and I apologize. So you're saying that if that's the case, that people will park, you're not allowing to park on the grass if it's a car or?
Right.
Right.
Is that what it is?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, but,
And the way that the code reads, you're allowed a driveway, through the front of the house, if it leads to a garage,
Right.
and then you can park, of course, on that driveway. But we're getting cases now where that paved driveway doesn't lead to a garage.
grassy area. See, I notice sometimes in Southgate, especially when you have a very short driveway, people pave their driveway and they have to leave the car overnight on top of the grass, but they don't do it every day. I would understand. So what is the procedure today? Does homeowners get a fine when a car is left on the grass? Or is that how?
Yeah, I mean, if they turn their, right, if they're the occasional, somebody has a guest.
Or
they park,
complain.
we don't worry about that.
is
But
continuous.
it's where they make a habit of parking or allowing.
And
cars
you
to be
could tell
parked,
by
yeah.
making a habit because you'll see that grass on the car. And then, so, and it's a quality of life type of, I understand. So
Right.
I'm trying to figure out
Yeah.
what you want to do for the future and what we have right now. So I'm just trying to.
Well, and particularly some of the older neighborhoods, I mean, they were developed way before the current zoning.
And now you got 4 cars in one small family.
Oh, yeah.
Well, but particularly up in the Fairview area, we've got houses that are well within the 30-foot setback. The houses themselves are non-conforming. We've upzoned the town. We got rid of the 5,000 square foot lots a long time ago, the 10,000s, the 15. We're now at 20 is the minimum size. And yet the houses, in some cases could be 15 feet from the front yard. So they're already in the front yard. And people are saying, where am I going to park?
Yeah.
Now, many of them have driveways that take you to, a garage in the back, or whatever.
I would be cautioned about, if you park your car in front of your house on the grass area, I would have a problem. But if somebody parks on the side of the house on the grass, it's not my property. They can park. It's just that the view and the quality of life that you park right in front of, it's not a parking lot. So we just have to make sure that we understand with the language, because let's say I have a broken car and I'm parking right on the side of my garage.
Is it registered? If it's not, we're going to cite you for it.
But if it's
yeah.
not, it's my property, so you know what I mean? So we have to be careful. With,
Yeah, but let's also understand too, when in zoning terms, when we talk about a prohibition of parking in the front yard,
Yes.
it's the zoning yard.
Yes, I
So it's
agree.
that, in the R20 district, it's the first 30 feet back. If your house is 60 feet back, when you, at the point where you get to that 30 feet from the right-of-way, you still have 30 feet from that point to the front of the house. You can park anywhere in there.
Correct.
It's a little unusual. That means you've got a fairly large lot.
Yeah.
But most of the time, the houses are really close or on that 30-foot setback. And that's where they're prohibited to park.
Mike?
And that's where the problems arise.
I kind of like the fact that they have to go to zoning to look at, and the zoning goes out and looks at a property. I like the fact they have a little oversight over it, so if you just kind of expand this, people are just gonna go widen it, and everybody always goes another foot, a little wider, 2 feet here and there.
Yeah.
I can understand, at least in my district, and I know I've gone through Southgate, and I know those houses, some areas are really tight too. I just see people encroaching on their neighbors, or you could have flooding issues. The more time you put blacktop down, you're flooding your neighbor out.
Yeah.
So I kind of like the fact that I'd like to just kind of leave
I
it.
kinda
And let the
agree.
zoning board do their job, because I think they do a really good job at it.
I agree with you, Mike, because I don't think there's that many where I don't think they're overwhelmed. I think it gives them a chance to look at each individual. We have, as you said, houses at 30 feet, 40 feet, 50 feet. We have so many different varieties. It can open, I think it can open a can of worms. It gives.
Yeah, you penalize other people for that, for a small number.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, well, what we've done in the last 2-3 years is decide these things pretty much on pragmatic terms. I mean, one of the conditions for granting a variance is that there's no reasonable alternative. And so in some cases, like Neil said, you've got a small house, it's close to the road. You know, it's not unreasonable for that owner to say, hey, you know, I've got a car, my wife's got a car, we both work, we need a double driveway. Okay, and we'll probably grant that. There are other cases where you get, you know, an older house, and we go out there and there are 7 cars. You think, good heavens, you know, who needs 7 cars? You know, this is in something that's zoned one-family residential, and in many cases, there were a couple where, I mean, we went out there and we measured, you know, look, you know, you can put a driveway in here, you can park in the back. There's access other ways. So we try to you know, not just approve every front yard parking thing. I mean, and some of the DBA members feel very strongly about this. I mean, this is one that really gets discussed. I think what would help us, if there would be some kind of guidelines, and I don't know whether it's language in the code or whatever, that makes it clear why we don't want to allow the parking in the front yard, that would allow us to take some of these applications where, and there was one, and it was not in Fairview. It was I think in your ward, Jay, where they wanted a driveway. I think it was like 30 feet wide or something like that, a single family house, which just seemed, you know, excessive. But we need a sense of, okay, the town board has now decided we don't like, you know, excessive parking in the front yard for these reasons, so that we can say, okay, unless there's some, you know, pressing, you know, unusual reason why you need this, our default position is going to be no.
Or if you have a handicap member of, and you need a bus, that's
Sure,
different.
and we have that. And, you know, there was one case where the person argued that they need to park in front of the house because the alternative required them to climb a long flight of stairs. Okay. That's something that we can. That's a trade-off that we'll have to think about. But it's a little bit hard when people come up and tell you all the reasons why, you know, it would be so much better for them to be able to park in the front, and you know, for us to say, well, you know, the problem with putting all those cars in the front yard is that it really changes the whole aesthetic of the street. And as you know, people's tastes vary, and that's sometimes a difficult case to make.
Yeah. No, I hear you. So maybe we should take a look at this code and make some changes that Jim suggested to give the zoning board, you know, a little more.
Yeah, and I'm thinking
definitive.
too, we could probably come up with a descriptive diagram or two, you know, sort of, you know, this is okay, this is not in general.
Yeah, I mean, that actually, you do that in some places in the code.
Yeah, we started that
Arlington
last
Town Center, where you got little diagrams saying, you know, this is preferred over this.
Yeah, we could do that. Okay.
Yeah, that would.
Okay.
And I agree with,
I think-
generally agree with Mike, though, I think.
Just leave it
to
alone,
just-
but
yeah.
we can beef it up a little
I
bit.
think it's a slippery slope.
It's not like this issue is
Rampant.
clogging the ZBA agenda.
Right, right. It's kind of one of those things that comes up
But it
every now
comes
and
up
then. And we get a
often
lot of
enough.
questions about it when it comes up and,
Yep.
you know.
Well, maybe, so if we beef up the language a little bit, it'll
Yeah,
make it
provide
a
a
little more
rationale,
clear and give the
right.
zoning board some real, definitive, answers as to why they are saying yay or nay, and,
Right.
Sounds like a good
Help-
idea.
Help you guys as well. Okay,
all right, beautiful,
great, thank you.
all
Thank you.
right.
Thank you, Mr. Jelly.
Thanks.
You didn't know you were going to testify tonight.
Thanks for the warning.
Yeah, I know.
Jim's gonna come to a meeting again. All right, let's move on to number 4, discussion.
Maybe we'll incorporate the zoning and the planning board together sometime.
We don't have a big enough room. Fence and hedge height front yard amendments, including visibility at intersections.
Yeah, this is one that I actually came up with a diagram for. I've been talking, and actually I had, probably about a year ago, I was talking with Sergeant Jika about this question of visibility at the intersections. And right now, our code is set up to restrict fence, hedge, and wall height along, the front yard. And particularly where you have a corner lot, you've got 2 front yards. And the rules say that you can't, within that front yard, and again, keep in mind, a lot of the context for this is the lots in the R20 district where you've got a 30-foot setback. And there are an awful lot of property owners, corner property owners, who are very surprised to find that they've got 2 front yards with 30-foot setbacks. And the zoning board has actually entertained a number of variances involving fences. People are looking for privacy. They're looking for, sometimes it's really not so much about privacy, but if they've got little kids, they want to, kind of keep them corralled within. There's a lot of reasons for having fences. But it's when they get over that 3.5-foot height within that first 30 feet that triggers the need for the variance. And I think the zoning board, again, has been doing a pretty good job of sort of sifting out and allowing for fences in the front yards, perhaps on some of the lots, maybe if they are not corner lots, but allowing fences of up to 6 feet in height, sometimes 8, depending on the application, to be sometimes within 5 feet of the yard. If it's not going to otherwise obstruct visibility along the street front, and it's not going to create, sort of a walled-off effect. That's the other reason for the restriction. But we've seen quite a few of these in the last several years as people were making improvements to their property. And one of the things that we've talked about at the staff level is, maybe what we should be doing is thinking in terms of a little more relief. In other words, the zoning board again will, and even if you agree to go forward with the proposal here, the zoning board is still going to have business. People still want to be able to put fences on the property line, and the zoning board will have to weigh those, sort of case by case. But I do think that we could safely allow fences of up to 6 feet in height within 15 feet of the front boundary line. You're still going to be protective of sight lines. You're still going to have sufficient room for people coming, particularly out of their driveways, and not be blocked by their neighbor's fence. And particularly if you flip to the diagram, the idea here is to and a lot of towns have this, basically a sightline restriction at the intersection, which sort of carves off and prevents people from installing anything over 3.5 feet in height that's going to create a visual barrier at the intersection. And that would be in addition to, or an additional restriction, particularly for corner lots. And so the idea here is that you've created you've got your sight line.
What does our code currently say about that?
Our code just simply says you can't have anything over 3.5 feet in height in the front yard. The problem, like I say, is that and to the extent that that prevents somebody from putting something within that first 30 feet, it's working. But I think it's a little excessive. We should allow people to bring their fences over 3.5 feet in height a little closer to the property line, not on the property line. We don't want that. But I do think that we should have a separate carve-out and protection for visibility at these intersections, which we do not have
So
today.
so the recommendation would be to go 15 feet from the edge of the street?
From the boundary line, which is not the road necessarily.
Right,
it's
but that's
typically-
what I'm asking. So what is the boundary line? Because these are the kind of questions the zoning board's gonna come up with. Are we saying the edge of the street? And if there's a sidewalk, how does that impact it? Because especially up in Fairview, you're gonna get, so is it the edge of the street? Is it the edge of the sidewalk? What is it?
It's the boundary line. So in
All
other
right, so
words,
what's that?
and it's variable. We have some instances where some of the older neighborhoods where you do have sidewalks that are inside somebody's property line. For the most part, you're going to find sidewalks within the highway right-of-way. So wherever that right-of-way
So-
boundary is,
Well, if you
From
use
that
my
edge
house
into the
use-
property.
Use my house for an example. I have the sidewalk, I have my split rail fence.
Yeah.
You coming in from inside the property line where my fence is?
I don't know where your boundary line is.
Is the
Is
boundary
your
line
usually
usually
boundary
at?
line the edge of the sidewalk?
I know I
Like
shoveled that
inside-
sidewalk.
Yeah.
Don't blow it.
Well, as a better example, there is a house on the corner of Marie Court and the Robin Road. And there's a big, who owns that? Who cuts that? The owner or,
Oh, it's a hedge?
yeah, it's an edge.
It's probably his. It's not, I mean, it wouldn't, the town wouldn't have installed it.
But it's really right on the sidewalk.
Yeah, the roads out there, actually, the paved portions of the roads in some sections are very wide. They may be as wide as the right-of-way. I couldn't tell you without seeing a survey.
So what we would have to do is the zoning board would have to get a survey of these properties, determine where the boundary line is. Maybe it's at the road, maybe it's just inside the sidewalk, and it would be 15 feet off that point.
From that point into the property,
Right.
instead of 30 feet right now. And so I think it would encourage, I think we're seeing a lot of variances for these kinds of offenses, but I think if we were to tell, and we're always going to see variances.
Now,
People,
let me ask you this. We're seeing requests for variances now, so where it's 30 now, does the zoning board normally grant a 10-foot variance? Because if we go to 15, are we still gonna have requests for variances, and then does it end
You
up being
will.
5 feet?
you will.
So,
Yeah.
I'm thinking,
Would it be better to leave it alone?
would it be better, right, are we still gonna see variance requests, and now is it gonna creep to within 5 feet of the property, of the
My thinking is
line?
Yeah, the zoning board has been granting, I don't think we've had any in recent memory where the
It's hard to
zoning
say
board has
no. I mean, I
allowed them
watch the
to
meetings, and I know what
go
the
right on
zoning
the
board
property
goes through.
line.
Property owners come in, it's a young
Yeah.
couple, they bought the house, they've got kids, they make a reasonable argument. Who wants to sit there and be the bad guy and say no?
I
So,
think the closest we
it's
had
not
was
easy.
one on New Hackensack Road about 2 years ago that they were allowed to go, it was either 5 or 10 feet. And that was not a corner lot, and I think that was probably the closest.
Yeah, that was a case where, I believe it's the one where the family had a child with a disability.
Yeah.
And there was a
think I
reason,
remember that.
was a safety issue. None of us are, I think, really happy with the way that turned out. But in any case, one argument in favor of Neil's proposal here is that there are quite a few houses, and if you look, where set back, there's often between two lots a line of shrubs or trees, and then you often find an old wooden stockade fence back there. So in effect, in some cases, we grant these because people want to just replace this rotting wood fence with a new one, and in which case, we kind of say, well, in a sense, it's probably grandfathered in. It's probably it's non-conforming, but it's probably legal, and in any case. It's simply replacing something that's there. The neighbors are okay with it. It's not causing a problem. It's not out blocking people's sight lines. You can still, as you walk down the street, you still have this kind of open feel, and what's the harm? So we would tend to approve that, and just putting that into the code would mean that some people don't have to go through the hassle of applying for a variance for something that's not a problem. So, in general, I would think this is probably not a bad idea. Typically, when we decide these, it's again on a case basis, and it's usually pragmatic. Is this fence going to create a problem for anybody?
And I think that's probably oftentimes the way, the decision should be made.
Yeah.
You're the relief valve, and
but
the
that's-
neighbors get to come in and give an opinion, and
Yeah.
I don't see, I mean, as long the neighbors and it does not affect the safety of the people and the fence, I'm okay with it. I would just
Yeah.
leave it,
leave it alone.
But
Yeah, I would leave it alone. That's my
but now these are fences that tend to come out perpendicular to the street,
Right.
or in some cases it's where there are two front yards on the corner. All you have to do is drive out to the house and have a look at it, and it's pretty clear which side of the house is functionally the front yard and what is in fact a side yard. And so for the side yards, we tend to say, okay, if you need a fence for some good reason, kids, pets, whatever, we tend to approve that. But the wrinkle, or the hard part, is making sure that fence now doesn't obstruct the intersection
Right.
visibility.
And I would say a survey would help you to abolish that. I mean, to see if that's the case. So
Yeah.
I would have an update survey,
Yeah.
to see.
And we work off the survey, and Neil's absolutely right. The relationship between the property boundary and the pavement is all over the place. I mean, there are people in older neighborhoods where the property line is way back from the pavement. So in effect, they're doing the town a favor by mowing the lawn and taking care of it.
I don't know about that.
I think this drifts a little bit away, but bear with me for a moment. In terms of these front yard fences, the toughest thing that we have is not so much visibility and whatever, but material.
I've heard those discussions.
Yeah, I mean, these white vinyl walls are one thing. A more open fence, maybe made of natural materials, so there's some metal fences, can be quite attractive and still function to keep kids from running into the road or whatever. And right now we have no way of saying, sometimes it's just negotiated. Okay, look, do something other than a solid slab, and we'll grant the variance, or we can negotiate over the height. Do you really need 6 feet? Would 4 work? Okay. But most of the members of the ZBA, feel more strongly about what it's made of and how it looks.
Yeah, I would interject in that because, number one is a budget of a homeowners.
Yeah, I know.
And then the second thing is that, it's my house. I watched one of session one time about that, the argument about what type of material.
Yeah.
I mean, as long as it's decent, it looks good, and financially, Fence is expensive today. You can ask Adams, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Better quality. It's better quality.
So I have to interject there. I think if it's up to code and it looks good, I think that's my personal opinion. You know, and I know, I saw that session, you know, you guys were arguing back and
Yeah.
forth with the.
Okay.
And it could be
Yeah.
that they could not afford a better, if they did, they would, you know, so. That's just my personal opinion.
You know,
Jim.
again, you know, one of the things that we have to consider is, you know, is this feasible or are there all feasible alternatives for the applicant?
Obviously, somebody wants to put a 2x4 and 2x8, then I have an argument. But if
Financial
it's-
considerations are
You know,
an
you just
important
purchased a house as a
feasibility.
young couple, they can't afford it, $20,000.
I hear you.
You know, so.
Yeah.
My,
Yeah, I would agree. So, you know, maybe let's hold off on doing anything with number 4 for now. Let us, you know, kick it around a little bit more. I think for the most part, the zoning board, although some of the decisions are definitely difficult ones, they do a good job in
Yeah, I think you do a really good job of sifting through.
considering all the
But-
ramifications and,
But I think Neil should go ahead and draft, you know, the business about having a fence 15 feet back. Just from the point of view of this simply lets a lot of existing fences remain, lets them replace them
Well,
without
if
having
we
to
can-
get a whole variance.
Probably the easiest way to do that is figuring out some replacement in kind language.
okay, that
So
sounds
I think I would
good.
approach it that way. And
Yeah,
you're
I
talking
mean-
specifically about like the dividing fence that's perpendicular coming between the two properties. You're right, because at the point where it gets within that 30 feet back, all of a sudden it's supposed to
The
drop to 3.5
replacement in
feet.
kind,
Yeah.
like.
I mean, there's one
I would
on
agree with
the
that.
agenda right now. We were out at the field trip, and we took one look at it and said, you know.
Been there for.
He's going to replace a rotting fence with
Yeah.
a new one in exactly
Yeah.
the same place.
Yeah, see if we can.
Why
distinguish
should
that,
he- why
Neil.
should he have to
Yeah,
go through the
That makes a lot
hassle?
of sense,
Yeah.
right, I agree.
Okay. Yeah, I will do that, and I'll get back to you. One thing, too, I would, right now, believe it or not, we don't have a definition of fence. So I would like to also, when we figure this out, this replacement in kind, I'd like to include that, and I've got that in this write-up that I gave you. The other thing, if you flip to the page before the diagram, it's this paragraph F. One of the things that we don't have in the code, we have this maximum height of 3.5 feet in the front yard. And then we also, on the side and the rear yards, we allow fences of up to 8 feet in height. One of the things that we ran into with Mr. Rakoff years ago was that he brought in these very large fence sections that were 10 feet in height, placed them, and then mounded the dirt up and said, that's 8 feet. So, but this last paragraph is intended to deal with this question of how are we measuring the fence? And the idea here is that you're measuring it from the original ground surface elevation, and that's what that description is, so we can prevent that kind of cheating.
Okay,
Okay, so I'll get back to you with a proposal on this replacement in kind question, and I'll include those two items. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Neil.
Any other questions? All right, that's it for me.
thanks, Neil.
Okay, thank you.
All right, and that brings us to the end of our committee of the whole items. Let's do committee reports. Finance,
Nothing to report.
Fire Advisory,
Nothing to report.
Government Ops,
Yes, I attended a seminar on climate smart communities. And this is a state program that would make us eligible for more grants, more or less leading to being more energy efficient. So it's LED lights and smart sizing of our fleet and solar panels and things like that. So the first step is very easy. It's just make a resolution that we want to register as a climate smart community. And then after that, we'd have to decide whether we wanted to have a task force or a person in charge and start working through the items that they want to see us do. And with each item you complete, you get points, and with the more points you have, the more grants you're eligible for. So it's a very interesting state program.
Good.
And I was also there with 3 members of our planning board.
great. All right, thank you, Ann. Land Use and Planning,
Nothing to report.
Personnel,
Nothing to report.
Rec,
The only thing I have to report is day camp is about 75% full. Swimming lessons are a little bit light, but they're slowly coming in. And this week, we start advertising on the radio for the camp and swimming lessons.
Excellent.
Otherwise, everything else is going pretty well.
All right. Senior citizens.
Nothing to report.
And technology and equipment, Mike,
Nothing to
nothing?
report.
Infrastructure?
I hadn't heard anything from the chairperson. And do you have anything on it?
No, I didn't hear
So
anything.
Nothing to report as far as I'm aware.
All right, that brings us to the end of our agenda. Is anyone who would like to address the board for any questions about town issues? Yeah. All right, JD, Jim,
You ready?
we have something?
Resolved, Town Board, Town of Poughkeepsie is hereby adjourned to executive session to concern the following matters to wit. One, litigation to discuss litigation strategy of the case known as U.S. Specialty in the Town of Poughkeepsie, New Hamburg Terminal. And two, confidential communication between the attorney, client, town board based on attorney-client privilege. And be it further resolved, there be no action appropriate money. So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Any discussion? Town board adjourns to executive session at 8:05 PM.